In this video, I will show all my 78 shots of the tournament and share some of the strategies and techniques that I wrote in my book. To make the video short, I will not show my setup routine, practice swing, and practice bounce. Read my book or watch my other videos for the tutorial on these techniques. On the first hole, the landing area of the tee shot suddenly becomes narrow. But I'm not worried because my innovative techniques and swing thoughts makes it easy for me to thread the needle even if I don't have good body coordination. Before I continue, I should warn you that the strategies and techniques in my book are not advisable for children and beginners who might have the talent or potential to compete at the highest level. My golf tutorial should only be used as a last resort for golfers who cannot break 80 despite trying hard for more than 10 years. This is where my shot ended up, right down the middle of the center. I only have 80 yards left to the hole. Most coaches will recommend to use a 3/4 swing or a half swing, but unless you are a touring pro who practices 8 hours a day every day, I think that's a bad idea. If you are like me who is uncoordinated and only has time to practice 10 minutes a day at home, you should only have one shot in your swing arsenal that involves timing, which of course is the full swing. A half swing or 3/4 swing is supposed to be easier, but if you don't practice it as much as the full swing, it actually becomes harder. That's why it's common for golfers to be more comfortable with a 150-yard shot compared to a 50-yard shot. It's ridiculous to see golfers hitting good shots from 150 yards, but inside 70 yards, they chunk or tap the ball, even if it's supposed to be easier. The reason why you still need to practice the half swing and 3/4 swing as much as the full swing is because the timing is different. The timing between your body turn speed and arm speed is the most difficult factor in a golf swing. So the solution is simple. Just eliminate the timing factor. Simply use a 7 o'clock pure body turn swing that does not involve the arms. You might argue that the ball cannot go as far in a pure body turn swing. The solution to that problem is to use a lower loft club. Example, in this 80-yard shot, I'm using an 8 iron instead of a wedge. You might argue that an 8 iron punch won't have enough height and spin on the ball, so you will need to land before the green and run the risk of a bad kick. Your argument is like telling a person who had bad grades in high school biology to become a neurosurgeon instead of a nurse because a neurosurgeon earns more money. When evaluating risk versus reward, you should take into account your ability. Example, if your goal is to work in the medical field because you enjoy helping people, but you had bad grades in high school biology, the correct decision is to become a nurse instead of a neurosurgeon because being a nurse will make you happy. If you try to become a neurosurgeon, you could end up with a triple bogey. Similarly, with this 80 yards approach, since I don't have good body coordination and I don't have time to get enough practice, the risk of a bad shot with a full swing, 3/4 swing, or half swing is greater than the risk of a bad kick when landing before the green. I'm better off with a much easier pure body turn swing because it does not involve timing. A coach telling me to do a 3/4 or half swing with a wedge because it avoids a bad kick would be like telling someone who had bad grades in high school biology to become a neurosurgeon because a neurosurgeon earns more money. This is where my much easier 7 o'clock pure body turn swing ended up. I still ended up with a delicious tap-in for a par. This shows there really is no need to be a neurosurgeon. Nurses can still enjoy helping people, buy a nice house, a nice car, send their kids to the best colleges, and travel anywhere for vacation. I rest my case, Your Honor. The next hole is handicap 1, which means it's the most difficult hole of this golf course. Doglegs are already tough as it is. They had to put bunkers on both sides of the corner to make it even more difficult. Despite my good drive, I still ended up in the fairway bunker. I bogeyed this hole, but I was still happy because I did not make a single mistake. You might think I'm delusional for saying I did not make a mistake, even if I bogeyed the hole. Actually, if you read the section in my book entitled Smart Goals and Strategies, you will be convinced that I'm not delusional. When playing a round, don't worry about your score. Measure your progress by counting the number of technique errors, such as directional errors, top balls, and chunks. Even if you score a 75, but you had, let's say, 10 technique errors, you should be disappointed because it means you still have a lot to work on to consistently break 80. But even if you score an 85 but only had 5 technique errors, you should be happy because that means you can now easily break 80. I'm sure you are confused at my seemingly illogical statements. Let me explain. It's possible to have a good score even if you had lots of technique errors if you also had many lucky shots. Examples of lucky shots are long putts, sand saves, and sticking it 2 feet from the pin from 100 yards away. Lucky shots are not sustainable and reliable, which means it would still be difficult for you to consistently break 80 even if you scored that lucky 75. On the other hand, non-technique errors are easy to correct with just a little practice and experience. Errors caused by lack of course knowledge such as wrong club selection or wrong read on the green are considered non-technique errors. Errors on distance control are also considered non-technique errors. Example is when your putt follows the intended line but you hit it too hard or too soft. Errors caused by factors beyond your control are also considered non-technique errors. Example is when you hit a good drive but your ball ends up on a divot in the middle of the fairway. So even if you score an 85 but most of your errors were non-technique errors, you should be happy because that means you can now easily break 80 with just a little practice. The advantage of this strategy is it prevents you from fixing something that is not broken. Therefore, when playing a round, I am more concerned with this sustainability card than my scorecard. I almost made a hole-in-one in the next hole. My ball hit the pin. This would have been the second hole-in-one in my life. In my first hole-in-one, I won a subdivision lot, a truck, a motorcycle, 100K in cash, and 6 nights in Plantation Bay Resort, where I scored another hole-in-one. Hole-in-ones make tournaments more exciting, but it should never play a role in measuring your progress. I missed my short birdie putt. I didn't make a single birdie the entire game. That is actually good news because it means my 78 gross score is sustainable. On the next hole, my drive was 270 yards with the wind, and as usual, it was right down the middle of the center. I had 90 yards left to the hole. Again, golf dogma dictates that you should use a wedge from this distance, but I used a 7 iron with my pure body turn swing instead. Okay, one more analogy. I promise this is the last of my self-interested crusades and phony philosophizing.
Promise, I promise.
Telling a 24 index golfer to use a wedge in an 80-yard shot just because a 1 index golfer does it is like a leftist advocating for free healthcare in a 24 index country like the United States just because a 1 index country like Denmark does it. It could lead to a grease triple bogey because a 24 index golfer is uncoordinated, just like the 24 index country is too self-centered and freedom-loving. Because I used a 7 iron instead of a wedge, I tapped in for a par instead of scoring a triple bogey.
Grabe!
On the next hole, my drive was right down the middle of the center again as usual. Then I used my 7 o'clock pure body turn swing for the approach shot again. And I parred the hole again. On the next hole, I was faced with another difficult drive. A little to the left, you end up in these bunkers. A little to the right, you end up in this forest. But if you follow the innovative techniques and swing thoughts in my book, it would be easy for any of you to thread the needle, even if you don't have good body coordination. My drive was right down the middle of the center, again, as usual. I had 100 yards left to the hole. Since I haven't been practicing that much, I should have just played it conservative and used a 7 o'clock pure body turn swing with a 6 iron. But I got too cocky and did a full swing with a 9 iron. My arm swing was too flat and I tapped the ball, resulting in a bogey. But even with this mistake, my full swing with a 9 iron still landed on the green but kicked right. And I still had a good chance to save par, but my 20-yard chip was a little bit too strong due to lack of practice. Let's record the technique mistake in my sustainability card. The next hole was a long par 4 and one of the toughest holes on the course. The landing area for the drive was insanely small. If your drive is a little too short, you end up in the water. If your drive is too long, you end up in these trees. A little to the left, you end up in this bunker. A little to the right, you hit this tree. But the innovative techniques and swing thoughts that I wrote in my book makes it easy for me to thread the needle. My drive was right down the middle of the center, again, as usual. I used this as an opportunity to test the theories in my book. To prove that a flatter arm swing angle really contributes to a top ball, I made my arm swing steeper. However, I overcorrected and the ball errored to the right. I bogeyed the hole, but I was still happy because it proved that the theories in my book are true. I just need to keep practicing and adjusting until all factors in my swing are compatible and become muscle memory. The next hole was another long par 3. I was putting for birdie again, but missed the birdie putt again. On the next hole, my drive was right down the middle of the center again, as usual. My approach shot ended up on the green for an easy par. What? Why did I say I'm on the green when I'm clearly not on the green? That's because my wrist chipping technique and swing thoughts that I wrote in my book makes it easy for me to put the ball near the hole for a tap in. Watch my video titled Making the Greens Bigger, where I will also open your eyes to an underground culture in golf you probably never heard of. Before I discovered the techniques in my book, I used to be just a flower in a golfing group which includes the two-time Class A club champion of Mactan Golf Course named Bart Vergara. Bart can tell you that just recently, my chipping was really bad. I can never save par from around the green. After I discovered my chipping techniques, all of a sudden I was kicking butt and they were all shocked and amazed at the sudden big improvement in my chipping. On the next hole, my drive was right down the middle of the center again, as usual, and I parred the hole again. The next hole was a long par 4 against the wind. I had a 190-yard approach using a 3-wood. I was on the green in regulation, but 3-putted for a bogey. I marked my 3 putts as a non-technique error because I did follow the line. The error was just on distance control. This does not worry me because I'm confident that if I spend 30 minutes a day on the practice green for just a week, then I would quickly regain distance control. I bogeyed the next hole because of wrong club selection on the tee. My 6-iron drive was still far from the water and left me with a difficult 200-yard shot. If I used a 5-wood off the tee, I would have been left with a much easier 150-yard approach. What made me really happy with this round was not my 78 gross score. It was that all my 3 bunker shots around the green were good. These are my golfing buddies. They can tell you that just recently, I really sucked at bunker shots. Whenever I'm in the bunker, I usually score a triple bogey. But then, I discovered a technique that makes it easy for any uncoordinated golfer to hit good bunker shots. Practice is important, so I invented a way for anyone to practice bunker shots at home. I also added the bunker shot as a par-saving feature in the Barrio Golf game that I invented. Before we go to the next hole, Let's update my sustainability card. The next hole was a 150-yard par 3. My tee shot was very good, but I was on the bunker due to wrong club selection.
Nice out!
Luckily, I still saved par. Let's record this club selection error and lucky sand save in my sustainability card. The next hole was another long par 4. My drive was right down the middle of the center again as usual, and I scored another par. The next hole was another long par 4. My drive was right down the middle of the center again as usual, but my approach with the 3 wood went a little bit to the right because my arm swing was a little bit steep. Then I tapped my chip shot because my downswing was too flat. I double bogeyed this hole, but I was happy because I hit another good bunker shot. I'm also not worried because you are not really expected to be on the green after hitting an approach shot using a 3 wood. Being around the green is good enough. Besides, in my home course, Alta Vista, Cebu, there are no holes where I need to approach the green with a fairway wood. Alta Vista is a hilly course, so the challenge is side hill lies. That's why I practice side hill lies at home, and I included side hill lies in Barrio Golf. I also made a video tutorial on how to hit side hill lies. The next hole was another long par 3. I was putting for birdie again, but missed the birdie putt again.
Tso, supoy mo no? Mura man jet plane.
The next hole was a very long par 4. My drive was right down the middle of the center again, as usual. I used this as an opportunity to test the theories in my book. To prove that a steeper arm swing angle really contributes to error right, I made my arm swing flatter. However, I overcorrected and I topped the ball. I bogeyed the hole, but I was still happy because it proved that the theories in my book are true. I just need to keep practicing and adjusting until all factors in my swing are compatible and become muscle memory. Coincidentally, the next hole is like a final test of my theories. So far, most of my full swing mistake was with a 3 wood. First, my arm swing was too steep. Then, my arm swing was too flat. So by now, I should have a feel for the correct arm swing angle. Coincidentally, this last hole is a very long par 5 where I need to use the 3 wood twice. This tournament proves the theories in my book are correct because both of my 3 wood shots were good. I needed to sink a long putt to par the hole, but it was because the hole was just too long and not because I made a mistake. But we should still register it as a non-technique mistake in my sustainability card, and we should also register the long putt as a lucky shot. Lastly, we should analyze my sustainability card to find out if my 78 gross score is sustainable. In order to consistently break 80, I need to make only 5 technique mistakes per game. That's because on average, I should expect 5 non-technique mistakes. 5 plus 5 equals 10 over par cannot break 80. However, on average, I can expect to have 3 lucky shots. So it's actually 5 plus 5 minus 3 equals 7 over par. In this game, I had 5 technique errors plus 5 non-technique errors and 2 lucky shots, resulting in 8 over par. The course was par 70, so my sustainability card more or less explains my 78 gross. From the surface, my break 80 looks sustainable, but numbers and statistics don't tell the whole story. So let's dig deeper. The truth is we were allowed an additional 2 mulligans. Usually big tournaments only has 2 mulligans, but in this tournament we had 4. Therefore, I should be 10 over par, which means my break 80 is not supposed to be sustainable. However, I'm not disappointed because I haven't had much practice and it was my first time playing this course. There were 2 club selection errors that are easy to correct. That leaves me with 8 over par. There were also 3 short putts that I missed and 2 chips around the green that were too strong because of lack of practice. I'm confident that if I just spent 30 minutes a day on the practice green for a week, I would have sank at least one of the 3 short putts and converted an up and down on one of those 2 bad chips. That leaves me with 6 over par. Based on my analysis, I can conclude that my break 80 is sustainable. It is important to be aware that even if you have zero technique errors, you can easily score an 85 if you don't practice your short game. That's because distance control around the green easily goes away if you don't practice. And if your chips and putts are too short or too long, you could still score a bogey on most of the holes. It is important to be aware of this so that you won't end up fixing something that is not broken, and you can still be happy with your game knowing that you already have sound techniques and complete knowledge of the swing mechanics, and you can easily break 80 with just a little practice. Thanks for watching. In the next video, I will introduce Barrio Golf,